Welcome, everyone, to the This Week I'm Into podcast. Today, we're talking about scuba diving. I'm your co-host, Pete Tyler. Later on in the episode, we're going to have Paul's friend from high school, Alan Liu, join us. But right now, I am with my friend and co-host, Paul Imbrugulio. Paul, how are you doing? Hey, Paul, you want to dive into it?
Oh, damn it. That would have been so much better.
I thought with like 90% certainty that's what you were going to do.
Oh my god. I disappoint myself.
No, I like it. Yours was still good. In fact, mine was low-hanging fruit. Like, I think yours was good.
Oh, Lord.
Cracks me up. Paul, start us off. We're talking about scuba diving. Scuba is, in fact, an acronym, right? Do you know what scuba stands for? I didn't. Disclaimer, I did not know before, but now I do.
Underwater breathing, submersible underwater breathing apparatus.
Dude, that's actually really close. That's actually really good. It's self-contained underwater breathing apparatus.
Oh, wow.
You kind of mathed that out. I'm impressed.
Thank you. Could you see the wheels turning in my head?
Yeah,
I definitely missed the C there, though. But
I saw the gears churning and making smoke.
Let me vent them.
All right, Paul. I'll start us off with the better one. Then, what do you know what scuba means? Let's just say the world's your oyster. Is there a dream destination for you? We're just so on it today. Is there a dream destination for you? Like, if you could go scuba diving anywhere in the world, where would you go?
So I think that I would go to Palau. I went on a vacation there in the 10th or 11th grade. And at that, wow. I don't know how to scuba dive, right? I don't have any like training or certificates or anything. But we went with two other families. And one of them, their whole family had a scuba diving trip planned. Like they all had their certificates and stuff. And they said it was like the coolest place they'd ever been. It seems like it's very like less traveled because it's like in the middle of the Pacific. It's a very small area. So there's like not a lot of impact due to tourism. Like it's still pretty untouched, I guess. Like there's a lot of coral death comparatively to like places that you hear like the Great Barrier Reef, that kind of thing. Yeah. So I would probably go there if I was able to.
Wow. Okay.
Even snorkeling, like it's very cute, like all the animals, but they're like, they could go to like under cliffs and stuff and see like animals that they're like, oh yeah, you can't see them from the top.
Okay. Wait, that's actually really interesting. I was unaware that Palau was a hotspot, but that's really cool.
There might be more cooler places like in the world of diving, but as a snorkeler, that place was pretty cool. So I'd recommend going if you just want to see fish or other aquatic life. Here's a fun thing for you, Hans, and they might have this other places, but there was a place there where, however, this like land mass formed out of the water because it's like a bunch of islands. It kind of looks like a volcano, but it's not active. It just like looks like a volcano where it's like a little upward island, but in the middle there's a lake, right? So imagine like is it called a caldera? Whatever is in the inside of like a volcano looking shape had a lake in it. And there were jellyfish that were in that lake, but because they'd been isolated for so long, they no longer sting. So you can swim in this jellyfish-filled lake, and they're everywhere. Like you can't avoid them.
Oh my God!
They don't sting.
Wait, that's so cool, actually.
Yeah, they tell you totally to not touch the jellyfish, but you can't like avoid them. So it's so
and
cool. They're like squishy. Yeah, they don't sting. They don't have that.
Because they've lost, like, evolution has determined that wasn't important. And through generations to generations, they've lost the ability to sting. Because they're isolated.
So it's pretty cool.
That is fascinating, actually. Okay, very cool. Something you described, and this is a total tangent now. When there is, like, a volcano, an underwater volcano that forms, and then you have that caldera-looking thing, and it eventually over time like loses its mass. That's how a atoll is formed. So the very first person, like an atoll is kind of like this really thin string of land mass, or like kind of an island, like Bikini Atoll. Yeah. The very first person to ever describe an atoll was Charles Darwin, like to describe the formation. So just connecting the dots here, like you talk about evolution, we're talking about geology, we're talking about atolls, we're talking about calderas.
There's a lot of cool stuff under the water, I guess.
Also, we'll get into a little bit later. I have some of the most popular scuba diving destinations listed, but Palau was not on there. So I think that was a really good pick.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. What is your experience with scuba diving or diving? Well, we can expand it to snorkeling because that's certainly what I'm gonna do. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So yeah, like I was saying, I don't have any experience specifically with scuba diving, but snorkeling, I like to snorkel. I mean, I really like watching fish. As Hans recently learned, I like the Roku fish background screensaver. No, but I really like snorkeling and looking at fish and turtles and stuff. So we'll do that most of the time. When we went on like family vacations. I used to live in Taiwan, which I'm sure I've mentioned. So we've like been to like the Philippines and like
Mhm.
Malaysia and stuff. So we've been snorkeling in those areas a bunch of times. I think the only like really crazy thing I've ever done was when I was in Hawaii last year. I went spear fishing.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
So well, I'm sure you could scuba dive and do it, but I snorkeled and I threw up because I get really bad motion sickness like while in the water.
Oh no.
And I didn't kill any fish for anyone wondering. I would have, but I just couldn't do it. I couldn't like I wasn't skilled enough.
Was it like a harpoon gun or was it like a manual, like you're throwing the spear yourself?
So I was visiting a buddy of mine, and his friend had the whole like spear gun, like full getup, and I
Gotcha.
just had fins and a life jacket. And he gave us this hand spear that was like elastic, and
Okay.
so you kind of like rubber band shoot it, and that's how it gets its speed. But yeah, I couldn't figure it out. I also just felt bad the whole time, so that didn't help. It sucks when you have like seasickness, but you also like being in the ocean.
You had seasickness and emotional turmoil, it sounds like. So,
Yeah. Well, I was learning that there are certain, at least in Hawaii, there's certain fish you're not allowed to catch. I don't know if
oh,
they're
okay.
endangered. I think the one that specifically weren't
Like
allowed to catch
protected.
protected, and I don't know if it was because it was like a state fish or something. But
Oh, yeah, the humu humu nuku nuku wapua'a.
yeah, funny enough, that might be it.
That's the state fish of Hawaii. Don't ask me how I know that or where that came from, but
I think that was it, Hans. All right, what about you?
like same, like no real experience with a scuba diving tank or anything, but I mean, I've gone snorkeling. I think people who scuba dive who listen to this episode are gonna be like, "What are you guys talking about? Like snorkeling is so different than scuba diving." But like, come on, we're trying to relate as best we can. So this is the
It's an
closest we've been
intro.
to underwater creatures. So, but yeah, similar experience to you. I remember one year my brother's soccer team qualified for the Far West regionals. So every year there's like all the states in the West, the winner of each state in soccer, meets up for a regional tournament. And one year my team didn't win, but my brother's team won. So it was being hosted in Hawaii. So
Oh heck
it
yeah!
was basically just a vacation for me. Like, of course, I'm going with my family to Hawaii. So we went and we watched my brother's team play. Thankfully, they got out in the group stage. So,
But your trip was already extended.
so yeah, but just in case they made it all the way to the final, like we had the whole week planned out. Like, so I mean, so we got a good vacation in Hawaii. That was super fun. We did snorkeling. I remember really enjoyed snorkeling. I remember being like a little freaked out. I think that what do they call that? When you're scared of the ocean,
Thalassophobia.
thalassophobia. That sounds right. I remember like going out into the ocean and like being a little freaked. So maybe I have a touch of whatever that is.
I think that's a healthy fear. You know what? When I was doing the spearfishing,
Hmm.
we basically swam out of the beach and we like went out into this kind of like rocky area that was like 100 yards or so offshore.
Okay.
And near the beach part, there was a lot of like sand getting kicked up. So, you have your little like snorkeling goggles on, and I couldn't see more than like a few feet in front of me. And I was so scared that something was gonna pop out like in my 5 foot view that I'm standing there with the little like pointy part of my spear like right in front of my face, like just in case, just to stab something. Actually, there were
Like,
turtles and stuff around too, so I was really like worried that like a turtle was just gonna like appear.
yeah, for sure. You for sure cannot harpoon the
No,
turtle.
no, 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 no.
But like
It
if a
was for
shark,
sharks.
yeah, I know exactly where your head's at because that's where my head would be at too. Is if there was a shark, I would be so freaked out. But like
Bop them in the nose.
everyone knows, like it is. like low key unreasonable to have a fear of sharks because they don't actually attack that many people per year, right? There's always that fact that like more people die from a vending machine than a shark every year. So, but like I can't help myself. Like I'm gonna be scared of sharks. Like, come
I like to
on.
think that the people who die from vending machines were doing something stupid, but if I died from a
Yeah.
shark, it wouldn't necessarily be my fault.
Okay. All right. Well, there's a there's a way to put it. Besides that, Paul, there's like I always thought there's this was super interesting, but there's this tiny little scuba school just outside of Boise, Idaho. And I've always been curious about it because like we're in Idaho. Like where are you going scuba diving? Like
I think you
I
can
think
scuba in lakes and things.
yeah, okay. We do have a lot of lakes, so maybe that's reasonable. Or I hope the actual case is like they just have a fun trip coming up and they want to get certified before the trip. So I think
Yeah.
that's probably realistic. And then the other thing, like I've always like been a little freaked out by the bends. You know, I've heard stories of people like go diving and then come up too fast and get the bends, and like that's always freaked me out. And then other stories of like people who go diving and then go on a plane on the same day, like that's also freaks me out. So I think we need Alan to come on and just like quail these fears.
Or reconfirm them.
Or yeah, sure.
Yeah, maybe don't go from underwater to a plane, Hans. Let's just plan your trip so you can have a day in between.
Yeah, there's no way I'm doing that. The other thing I thought was like, you know how this podcast has been inspired by jumping into a hobby every week. One of those hobbies we've yet to talk about for me was watches. Like I just got super into watches for like 2 months, and then I stopped getting into watches. But because of that, there is a specific kind of watch called a diver watch. Yeah, yeah. So it's a style, right? It's like it's pretty much just got these like bright orange dials, and they are used by divers. I mean, now of course. Ooh, look at that watch.
You just inspired me to open up my watch that I got when I was weirdly into watches for 2 months.
Yeah, I think a lot of people go through that phase. But yeah, the diver watch, it has a super bright orange dial so that if a diver was wearing it, they would be able to see the dial even when they're, below a certain depth and the light is, not as obvious. So I always thought that was really interesting, and I really like the diver style. So
I like a more simplified watch, I think.
oh,
Didn't you
okay.
just have a watch that I saw? Were you the one with the watch from China?
I got
Oh,
it.
hell yeah, yeah. See, I like that kind of watch. It's very simple.
Thank you. Thanks for letting all our listeners know I got it from China.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks very
Shi.
much. Yeah. Oh, jeez. Anyway, Paul, I did find just a little bit about the history of scuba diving. If you want to hear anything about that,
Oh, a Hans's fun fact. Hans's fun fact. Diving fun facts with Hans.
thank you. History of scuba diving. It's such a wide hobby that when you look up history of scuba diving, it was really hard to own in on everything. But the thing I want to talk about is the diving bell, which was first described by Aristotle in 360 BC. And so do you know what the diving bell is, Paul?
No, I don't think
It's
so.
okay. So imagine it's so interesting. It's literally the shape of a bell, right? And imagine like it's like a church size bell, like something you ring at every
Okay.
hour. It's
Yep.
like that big. You put somebody in it, and then you drop it into the water. Like so, it's like kind of like I don't know, around their shoulders, I guess.
Oh, for oxygen.
Right, you drop it into the water, and then the air can't escape the bell. So you have like a pseudo scuba device because you're trapping the air with it. So you have like a certain amount of time with air in the bell underwater. Obviously, there's some things that you need to physics out a little bit because at one point it's going to be buoyant and you're not going to be able to get that far down. But I guess if it's heavy enough, you can get some depth. So I don't know. I just thought that was super interesting. So,
Do
and
you
the
know
fact
if
that
those old diving suits, the ones where it's like the metal helmet, they got the little cross plate over the
yes,
glass?
imagine the do you know the Scooby Doo villain who wears the?
Yeah, exactly. That's
That's who
exactly
I
what I'm thinking
imagine.
of. I wonder if those work the same way because I feel like I thought that what they had was a tube that extended out to the air above, and that's how
Mm.
that like worked instead of having like a compressed air tank like they do now.
I bet through the development of scuba devices that is just like the natural progression. But I think you're right. I mean, I think it operates. I think it probably originally operated like that. Then maybe they added a tube. At one point, they brought in a compressed air tank. So there you go.
Yeah, no, it's super neat.
Yeah. Besides that, I mean, that's really the one. There was so much about the history of scuba. Like, and there's so much you can focus on. I just thought the bell was
Your
really
favorite.
interesting. I really love it. Yeah, it's like a physics problem, and it's just so interesting. Like someone came up with that, and good for them because I think that is it, that is so creative. Is what I'm trying to say. You know, go Aristotle. All right, I got a couple more fun facts for you, Paul. You want to hear them?
Bam.
Okay. Do you know why a scuba diver will sit on the edge and fall into the water backwards?
Because if he falls forwards, he goes into the boat.
So apparently you've heard that one before, huh? Dang it. I thought that was so funny. But I think I was actually cracking up when I read that. It was so stupid because I was so stupid. It was so funny. Okay. All right. Never mind. Never mind.
Sorry, bud.
Okay. No problem. Anyway, here's a real fun fact for you. The deepest dive ever made by a single person was Egyptian Ahmad Gabir. He dived to a depth of 332.35 meters in the Red Sea on September 18th, 2014. I will say caveat, I don't know how old my websites that I'm getting my fun facts from are, so this could have been broken. Again, always take my fun facts with a grain of salt. But anyway, to get all the way down this 332 meters, it took him only 15 minutes. But because of the rules of, you know, you don't want the bends, you have to be very slow and cautious with your ascent. It took him 15 minutes to get down. It took 13 hours and 35 minutes to ascend all the way up.
I don't know how long those air things last, but he must have brought a bunch down.
Yeah, I think so. Because there's no way, like, that's so long.
Yeah.
Dude, can you imagine being underwater for that long?
No, that sounds so awful. I mean, the amount of pressure you're under at that depth too. It's got to be so unsettling to your body.
I know, I guess you have to love it. But going off that, Paul, extra fun fact for you. The longest dive in the world, another Egyptian, Saddam Kilani. Do you want to guess how long he was underwater for in this single dive? It's shocking. It's shocking.
Okay, so I'm going higher than a day then. I'll do a day and a half. So what, 36 hours?
Allegedly, 145 hours.
No, no, no. He could not be awake for that long. That's fake.
That's a great point, Paul, because he wasn't awake for that long. He brought in like buoys, like little buoyancy beams. They would keep him in place at a certain level while he slept, allegedly. So
He must have had a crazy mask and stuff on because that just seems so dangerous.
I don't know the logistics there. I can't tell
And
you the
eating,
logistics.
like you can't eat, I think. I don't know. Maybe you can. Maybe you can take your mask off. I guess I don't know how deep he was. Maybe he was just in a pool.
Wait, yeah, maybe he was just in a pool and he was just coming up for breaths and then going back down. No, probably not. Probably not. But yeah, pretty interesting, right?
That's so unnecessary.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would never be able to do that.
No.
145 hours
No, that
underwater.
sounds awful.
Yeah, I don't know. I would never do 24 hours. I probably wouldn't do greater than 3 hours. So
Yeah, I don't know how long a normal
yeah.
dive is. Probably like 3 hours, couple hours. You know what it is. I don't know if this bothers you, but on like the little snorkeling things, and I could be doing this wrong, right? You have your little like you kind of bite into it. It's not like a full face or anything.
Hmm.
She like bite into the little like blow tube, and I must be biting it too hard because after a little while it hurts my teeth.
Oh, wow. Are you using it like a mouth guard? Like
Yeah, probably because I don't want any water in it, so I like bite down, so it like creates a seal. You know, it's probably not doing it right, but
That's fun. You're like fatiguing your like mastication muscles.
yeah.
Okay. Anyway, Paul, from what I found, there's kind of two big reasons you that like a place will become a popular spot for diving. That is one because of beautiful nature. So like I don't know, Great Barrier Reef, for example. You know, there's incredible fish, incredible coral reefs, you know, landscapes. Then the other reason is like places can become a hot spot if there's like a lot of, man-made structures like sunken boats, airplanes, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, you've seen those videos where they like drop like old trams or random planes into the ocean to create like a place for coral to attach.
Oh, interesting. No, I haven't. Is that in the name of like nature conservation?
Yeah, they
Mm,
they'll drop like large structures into the ocean, and
okay.
the intent is for it to create like places for fish to hide and then also for coral to attach, and it kind of becomes its own little coral reef.
That's
Well, small version,
interesting.
but
I bet that serves scuba divers recreationally too. Like it would be
yeah, I
cool
would
to
think so.
see
Yeah.
a coral reef on top of a, abandoned tram. Yeah. So anyway, there is a deep swimming pool for diving.
Oh,
This is
in
a
Dubai or
business in
something.
Dubai. Yeah,
Yes,
you knew
I've
that
seen
already.
this.
Okay. All right. Okay, so the world's, deepest man-made swimming pool is in Dubai. It's 60 meters, give or take. And it's called Deep Dive Dubai. And in it, they put a lot of like little like treasure chests and like games for scuba divers to play. So people like dive down and like, explore this like ancient city that this deep dive Dubai has like created. So
Yeah, no, it looks kind of cool. I mean, it's
yeah.
definitely a big gimmick, and I think you can stand on the outside of it too and look in.
Hmm.
Like it's not just in a big like cinder block pool, so it looks
Oh,
pretty cool.
interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that looks like pretty interesting. Pretty.
When in Dubai, you got to do a bunch of crazy stuff.
I feel like Dubai has a bunch of that like eccentric stuff that like it's like okay, cuz it's Dubai.
Yeah, only there can you do it, so you got to go.
Yep, yep. I just thought that was interesting. Man-made. Uh they have like little I saw a video of a diver going in and he went into this like abandoned house, right? Quote unquote. And in the house there was a chessboard with really heavy chess pieces that would stick to the board. So he played like a game of chess while he was diving. So I thought that was
That's
like
awesome.
pretty funny. Yeah. But on the flip side, so there's a man-made one for you. On the flip side, here are some of the most popular diving spots in the world. You think you already named a couple. The
Hawaii, Great Barrier Reef. Yeah,
Great Barrier Reef. Yep, Great Barrier Reef in Australia. As far as I know, though, it's becoming less accessible to dive at the Great Barrier Reef because of
yeah,
coral bleaching and stuff.
yeah. I think they don't really want people doing it anymore.
Yeah, so I think previously that was we maybe we can ask Alan, but previously that was like probably number one destination for diving. Now I think it's becoming a little less accessible. The Maldives, I mean, just like beautiful, right? Like I always had a dream of like being on like a bungalow in the in the water, you know?
Yeah,
But the way those travel websites that have the pictures of the bungalow and it's like freaking beautiful and the crystal clear water. I always feel like those pictures are just saturated the crap out of. So like,
no, no, they are. We actually went to one as a family one time, not in the Maldives. I don't know where it was, like, but it's one of those photos where it's like all of the so it's like on a boardwalk, right? Like the boardwalk extends forever, and there's like a bunch of little like units, like hotel room units on it. Maybe it's a bungalow. I don't know what you call them. And the water's like super clear blue or whatever.
yeah.
I mean, okay, we could have been there wrong time of year, right? But we go out and like it looks like that, except for the fact that the water is like gray and choppy,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like you can't really jump off into it because there's no way. Like there are ladders to get you back up, but like they don't want you jumping off of it into the water.
You're taking the magic away from me a little bit here, Paul.
Well, I just want to make sure if you know to like it could not be as nice as it seems
Okay,
because I
set
feel
my
like I was lied
expectations.
to.
Yeah, okay. You gotta adjust your expectations a little bit there.
Yeah,
Another one, the Galapagos Islands. Probably is not super surprising, right? It's just another beautiful, incredible biodiversity, right?
yeah.
Good place to scuba dive. And then a super interesting one I found was in Belize called the Great Blue Hole. You ever heard of that? No, this is new to me too. But it sounds very similar to what you were describing earlier, where it's kind of this isolated patch of it's previously a sinkhole. So you have just ocean like like ocean, but it's not super. There's not a huge amount of depth. And then in the middle, there's this noticeable change in color, and apparently you can actually see it from a satellite. That is a sinkhole that is in Belize. It's called the Great Blue Hole, and people can actually dive down into the sinkhole, and it's kind of like isolated from the ocean around it. So I thought that was also pretty interesting. I think
Cool.
that maybe relates to the caldera thing you were talking about too, but who knows?
I don't
Don't
know.
quote me on that. Yeah.
Quoted.
Cool. Okay, Paul. Those are my fun facts for you.
Sweet.
Sweet. Do you want to hit us with any scuba diving resources?
I have no scuba diving resources, only snorkeling resources.
Snorkel. Go out in the ocean. It's fun. Don't have
Try not to get motion
thalassophobia
sickness.
like I do or something.
Thalassophobia.
Thalassophobia.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Thank you.
Don't try to pronounce words like Hans.
Okay, cool. Well, I don't really have any resources either, so maybe Alan can fill us in later. But anyway, I feel like that's a good as time as ever. Let's bring Alan on after the break. Welcome back, everybody. Joining us now, we have Paul's friend from high school, Alan Liu. Alan, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Alan, would you mind just giving yourself an introduction and what you're here to talk about today?
All right, my name is Alan. I'm from Taiwan, and today I'm here to talk to you guys about the wonderful world of scuba diving. I think to start us off, I'm going to ask you guys, what is scuba? What do you guys think is scuba?
Wait. The acronym?
Sure. I mean, what's your answer to that question?
Well, funny enough, Hans just quizzed me on what that acronym was, so we do
I had
know
to
it's
look it up.
self-contained underwater breathing apparatus.
Oh man, you guys are one step ahead of me. Yes.
I know. We did our research.
No, yeah, we had to look it up before this episode for sure.
But yeah, I think I had gone about like 4 years scuba diving without even knowing what it meant, so no worries.
You just thought it was like a cool name.
I just
that
thought
people
that's what it was
called
called, man. But speaking on that, I started scuba diving when I was 12 years old, and the way that I got into it was through my family, mainly my father. He was a diver when he was younger, and then I think he got up to a dive master. So when we were around the same age, he started learning. He wanted us to learn the same thing. And then for scuba diving, the reason that I was really interested in it because he had a bunch of stories about how when he was diving in Taiwan, they used to go spearfishing and they used to catch like lobsters. And there were stories of like groupers that were so big when you take them out of the water, like you have to tie it to the roof of the car, or like how there's like these caves that are like filled to the brim with lobsters. And hearing these stories about like massive eels, massive fish, like corals everywhere on every surface, it really makes you like want to go and see it for yourself. And I think that's why I was so interested in it and why I pursued it so much. But also because my dad pushed me a lot to do it.
So you learned in Taiwan, Alan?
I did learn in Taiwan. I learned with my brother, and my brother's been my dive buddy since we were kids, and then up until I was 18.
And then you said your dad is a dive master. Is
Yeah,
that right?
that
What does it
is.
mean to be a dive master?
So in scuba diving, there's different levels to what you can do, and each level requires a certificate. So I think it's important to introduce that there's organizations around the world or like international organizations that will like give these certificates. And one of the most popular ones is PADI, PADI, the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. They offer like one of the widest ranges of courses, and I think they're also like accepted at a lot of dive shops and tourist destinations like around the world. So they're definitely like the leading force. But that's not to say there aren't other ones. Just to name a couple, there's like CMAS, SSI, BSAC, NAUI, RAID, TDI. Those are all really
Okay.
There's a lot.
yeah. There's a lot,
yeah.
but each one has their own specific thing. For example, RAID is a Rebreather Association of International Divers, and TDI is Technical Diving International. So depending on what you want to do, there's a lot of different associations. But I think my focus is mainly on the recreational scene. So for recreational diving, the most basic license is called open water, and that is going to be like the entry point for everybody.
Gotcha. So do these different licenses, like what do they allow you to do, right? So if you just have the open water license, does that mean like you can only do like certain locations, and then you have to get like higher level licenses to do different types of dives?
Yeah, so when you're an open water diver, you're pretty limited in terms of how deep you can go. The maximum depth is 18 meters, or I think 60 feet. So for an open water diver, you cannot exceed this limit, and it definitely limits how many dive sites you can go to because unfortunately, a lot of the cool things that everyone wants to see are a lot deeper down. So in order to progress, you need to take the next level class, which is advanced open water. So that class you need to pick specializations, and the specializations will depend on where you are. So, for example, if you live in a place with cold water as opposed to tropical water, you need to wear a specific type of equipment called a dry suit. And a dry suit prevents your body from losing heat as quickly to the water because there's a layer of air insulating your entire body. So you actually don't get wet underneath, which is really cool. But typically, you'll use that for cold water. And then if you were taking the advanced course in a cold area, you'd probably use that as your specialization. And there's other ones that are more broad, like buoyancy or like night diving. That's a really good one, especially because if you turn off all your flashlights, you can see a lot of like the bioluminescence.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Okay.
Another like a side story. When I was up in the San Juan Islands in Washington, in the evening, if you go swimming in the little dock, then like when you jump in the water, the bioluminescence flares up, so it's like a ripple across the surface of the light. Yeah,
Whoa. I haven't been up there yet, but I've been meaning to. I'll have to check that
it's
out.
great. It's beautiful. You have to. Sorry to get so sidetracked. Okay, so there's advanced, right? There's a bunch of specializations I can talk about later. The next one is rescue. That's a really fun one. You learn how to like kind of rescue your buddy in a situation where maybe they're like unconscious or maybe they're injured, and they need assistance getting out of the water or getting back to the surface from depth. So it's a really great course. I really recommend Rescue Diver. Then after that, we exit the recreational scene and we enter the professional scene. So professional will be dive master, and in that first level, you're kind of working for a dive shop as like a guide, also as like a assistant to instructors, and also there are certain courses such as like the refresher course that you can teach as like a dive master. And then after that, you become an open water instructor, and then open water instructors can certify a person who does not know how to scuba dive at all into a like scuba diver. That's a pretty cool one. That's where I was at. I was teaching a few advanced classes and I taught a few rescue classes. I do really enjoy teaching rescue because I think it builds like a really strong like bond or camaraderie among the dive buddies because you're toughing it out and it's really tiring having to lift other people and all the gear. So I think that's like a really great class if you can work up to it.
That's super cool. So, where can you take all these, Alan? Like, you did in Taiwan, but I know you scuba dive like a bunch of different places. Is something you can get all these certificates? I mean, maybe minus the specific specialties of wherever location you're at, but like, could I do it out in Seattle? Like, could Hans do it in Idaho? Or do we kind of have to go to a place that's more tailored to diving?
All right. So you definitely need to be near a body of water. And not every body of water is diveable. For example, there are people that scuba dive in rivers. I think you can see it on YouTube sometimes. They like to go treasure hunting and they get like lost phones, lost jewelry, stuff like that. Maybe even more dramatic ones like, oh, OMG, like we found like a gun from like a police case or something, you know, just clickbait stuff.
I watch magnet fishing
Yeah.
videos sometimes, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Those are really great ones. Yeah, but there's also people that dive in the lakes. I mean, now that I'm in Nevada, there's people that dive in Tahoe. Apparently, I didn't even know that.
Really?
Yeah,
Hmm.
Are you gonna try that?
maybe it seems a little scary. It's kind of cold too. I'm definitely more of a warm. Yeah, I'm a warm water guy. I did cold water diving a little bit. It was tough in Seattle.
Yeah, speaking of locations, like where did you first go scuba diving and like where's been your favorite? Where did you grow up with? Like what are the most interesting places you've been with it?
I first learned in Taiwan, and it's important to note if you're ever going to learn scuba diving or if you are interested in scuba diving, I would really, really recommend just seek out the dive shop near you, go in person, make a phone call. You can send an email, social media if they have any of that. But the biggest thing is just to reach out to the dive shop and ask them what they offer because the information online it will tell you what each course does and what it offers and what certificate you get and stuff. But the specifics of where you will actually dive, how much it costs, what kind of gear you need, who you're going to be working with, who's going to be teaching you. You need to ask your local dive shop. If you cannot find it like through Google, maybe like social media groups like Facebook or something is good. But in this day and age, I really can't imagine that they don't have like a Google page, you know. But in terms of like where you can dive, there has to be a body of water. Definitely needs to be like safe, relatively safe, and within reasonable distance. I think I do know a lot of people that can like drive maybe from like one state to the other to dive, or like back in Taiwan. When I lived in Taipei, the nearest place to dive is the northeast coast, and that is about like an hour's drive. So when I first started diving, it was in the northeast coast of Taiwan. One of the cool places there is called Longdong, or Dragon Cave, but they call it that not because of a cave, but because the arc of the bay. They say it looks like a dragon's head.
That's very auspicious.
Yeah, it's really great. There's a lot of great dive sites. The northeast coast of Taiwan is really interesting too, because one of the examples, or like kind of like common analogies, is that it's like miso soup. So miso soup, if you have miso soup before.
What? Yeah, but I'm
Yeah, we've
sorry. I'm
had
not
miso
sure
soup.
I'm picking
I
up
don't know
the
where this is
connection.
going though.
All right, hear me out. So when you drink a bowl of miso soup, if you let it sit, the powder kind of settles to the bottom. But if you stir it up, then it's cloudy and you can't see through it. That's exactly like the water in the northeast coast of Taiwan. So a lot of the
Okay.
divers there call it the miso soup, because the visibility goes really, really terrible if the water starts moving, especially if the tide comes in or out.
That's a beautiful analogy.
And
I've never heard that before.
no, it's true. It's true. Oh, another really funny one in the southwest coast of Taiwan. There's a cluster of islands called Penghu. Paul, have you been there?
I've never been, but I
You
know what you're
you heard
talking
of it,
about.
yeah. So
Yeah.
in Penghu, the currents are really crazy, and there's different currents in the ocean that kind of like crash into each other, and because of that, it attracts like fish that like currents, such as the barracuda. Really cool. So you get these huge schools of barracuda, but it's a tough place to dive because the currents are very sporadic. They don't just go in one direction. They can go up and down even. And I've had an experience with that. We were doing a safety stop, and normally I don't wear gloves when I dive because I don't feel the need to like put my hands on anything. But because the current is so intense in this place, they recommend that you wear gloves. So I did wear gloves, but one of our buddies didn't, and because of this current that's like up and down, left and right, it's so crazy. I had to like grab onto a rock, and then also like grab onto my buddy, and then hold us there, because if we didn't, we'd like fly upwards. And then because of that like crazy
Oh.
movement, yeah, they call it a washing machine current.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And isn't it also super dangerous to like ascend super quickly like that,
Oh
even
yeah,
with the currents
yeah,
taking you
most
up? Yeah.
definitely, yeah. So uh, I could talk about a little bit of the diving safety later on, but before all that, I kind of want to finish with the personal side of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I think that like in terms of the aspects that like I enjoy the most, it's just such a unique experience. The weight of the water, the lighting and the sound, because the deeper you go, the less like wavelengths of light can reach that depth. Red is the first one to go. So if if bring a piece of like red plastic underwater, it kind of looks like purple. The deeper you go, and another one is that sound travels like 4 times faster underwater, but because you're underwater and like humans aren't made to like breathe underwater, so everything is muffled because our hearing works like on the surface, not really underwater. But it's super cool. Also, I really think that like underwater terrain is really trippy. I have a lot of dives along like big drop offs, where it's kind of like an abyss and you can't see the bottom. That's a really like intense feeling, and also just like caves, caverns, and stuff like that. Not to mention all the animals.
Yeah, I think the animals is something I really want to touch on because I think that's so interesting, just like the marine biodiversity that you see. You talked about barracudas
Hmm.
and schools of barracudas, which I think is crazy.
Yeah.
But and then also earlier you were sharing with us some photos of your dives, and I saw the two octopi fighting. And like, what? So like, what kind of like? Do you just see that all the time when you're diving, or do you have to be really patient to see those kinds of things? Or and then can you just explain like your experience with marine biodiversity in general.
Yeah, most definitely. You do have to be pretty patient. I was really interested in diving because of my dad's stories about how many animals there were all around you. Nowadays, that's definitely not the case. A little sad, but you know, it is what it is. See it while you can. I think the more you dive and the more you understand like the environment you're diving in and like what like the animals eat and like where they like to go and the things that they maybe like they like to hide or like come out at certain times of day. Once you kind of understand those things, it's a lot easier to find them. For example, some advice passed on to me from another instructor. Yeah, he was my mentor. His name is Yen. So he would tell me to, if you want to look for an octopus, look for an enclosed space with broken shells around it, because after the octopus eats whatever little critter it gets its hands on, or sorry, it gets its tentacles on, it like throws the shell out of its hiding spot. So you can
That's
kind of
awesome.
find them with all these little shells scattered around. Mantis shrimp you can find because they like to burrow, but they oftentimes have two entrances. So in case like something happens on one side, they can run out the other. Another one
You're
is
smart.
the harlequin shrimp. They kind of like to tuck underneath rocks, and then they're generally like around places with sea stars or sea sponges. They eat sea stars. So if you know these certain details about where you're diving, you can definitely find things. I think it really just depends on your luck as well.
Do you go to different spots like looking for certain animals? Like are there like tricks of the trade? Like obviously you're like, "Oh, I know if I see like the two holes I'm looking for a certain kind of shrimp," but you're like, "Oh, I know in like warm weather it's going to have like these kind of animals or if I go to like cliffs I see these kind of
Yeah,
things."
yeah. I think it's definitely kind of competitive for photographers, which is kind of weird saying that.
Mm.
They they really like to like get to whatever like is interesting and take a picture of it first. I'm not a big fan of that side of or that aspect of it. I maybe that's just like something in Taiwan that I noticed, but because scuba diving became so popular, a lot of people really like to take pictures. Um, so I definitely think there's a little bit of like insider info. One time, my my instructor, my mentor Yen, he knew where a seahorse was, and he took me to see it. And then he also knew where a sheep nudibranch or a sheep sea slug or sheep nudibranch. Sorry, it's about like a millimeter big, but it's really cute. They're pretty tough
Okay.
to find because they're
Yeah,
so small. They live on a specific type of a seagrass. So in order to find them, you have to really be in the know for the area. Yeah. So there definitely is that kind of like talk among divers like of what they see.
that's interesting. So there's not a lot of it's like if I know this place, then it's not necessarily like wide knowledge. Like you kind of have to choose who gets that information shared with them.
You're not posting about your specific seagrass on Instagram letting all the photographers know.
It's a little sad, I think, just because not everybody has the same regard for like the environment that you do. So everybody that I dive with in the shop that I learned at, and they're all really like conscious of like protecting the environment, and I think that's really important, especially having been diving since I was 12 years old. I'm I'm like I'm like what 25 now, so it's been a while. It's definitely a little sad to see like things go over time. For example, those seahorses I mentioned, usually they're stationary, but they're not there anymore. So something had to have happened to them. So it's a little tough seeing that. That's why I always keep saying like go out and see it, go out and learn, and take a chance. You know.
Yeah, totally. It's definitely sad when you hear all the things like obviously you hear about the big stuff like the Great Barrier
Oh
Reef,
yeah,
but
for sure.
yeah, when you actually like go and see them, I feel like it really gives you the notion that you need to do things better to kind of keep those things alive. Actually, at the Seattle Aquarium, which you've probably been to, Alan, they have a huge like coral like rehabilitation effort, which is pretty neat to see.
Yeah, the Seattle Aquarium's like one of the really great ones. I have a friend that works there, or I'm not sure if she still works there, but she did and maybe still does. So I need to ask her. But anyways, it is a really cool place. I recommend like if you're in the area, go check it out. They also have like a lot of really knowledgeable people, like who have like there's like a touch pool area, and they can tell you about the different animals. Yeah, so I think it's a great way to get kind of interested in it.
Yeah, totally. Alan, if we want to pull up one of the photos that you had earlier, I think this actually would be a really cool like show and tell. But you were talking about gear, and I think it would be really cool. Maybe we can throw up a photo on the video side of things, and then you can kind of like show us the different types of gear, and then maybe talk about like the safety aspects of diving. Because
Oh,
I mean,
sure.
in my knowledge of watching it online, they have like all these like hand signals and different like rules of the trade.
Oh, wait, well, we can do hand signals really quick. I know some pretty good ones.
Okay, me and Hans will follow
All
along.
right,
All
the
right, let's
most
do it.
basic
Yeah.
one. The most basic one is you're gonna see this is the okie dokie. All right, this is your bread and butter for scuba diving, man. All right, if I'm okay, let's pretend I'm taking you guys scuba diving right now. We can't talk, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So I don't want to have to write on my little slate like, hey, like this is what you have to do, and like show it to you every time.
Wait,
That's
you have a
Japan.
little slate?
I
That's a
do, I
thing.
do,
Like,
yeah.
oh,
Oh,
that's cool.
that's cool.
So
Like
instead
an
of
etch a
that,
sketch.
yeah, turning the little knobs underwater. Nah. If I'm gonna ask you, are you okay? I'm hitting you with one of these. You gotta
And we
yeah.
respond with an A.
You gotta let me know.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
you okay,
Yep.
man? You okay? You okay? You're gonna be doing this a lot, especially if you take people diving. Just you're asking everyone, "Are you okay? Are you okay?" Like it's crazy. Then the one that's a little bit like, oh, like it gets you a little bit nervous is when someone replies with, "No, I'm not okay." So this is gonna be your
Okay, so the little hand wave, like the
shaking
flat
your
hand
hand.
wave.
yeah. This is
It's
like
like it's how I would communicate. Like if someone asked me how was your meal, and I would say so. I'm
Mhm.
like shaking
Eh.
my hand.
yeah.
Okay.
So for example, if I had a cramp, right, I'd be like, I'm not okay, and then I'd point to where I'm cramping. Maybe it's my arm, right? I'm not okay here. Or
Okay.
for example, a more realistic one would be if we were descending and maybe I had some discomfort in my ear, then I'd be like, hey, I'm not okay, and then I'd point at my ear, and then whoever's with me would go from there. The next most important one is this. If I ask you this, this means how much air do you have, and then different countries
Okay.
use different measures. So yeah, so I'm gonna ask you, yeah,
So it's like a palm with two
Palm,
fingers.
palm up, tapping your palm with 2 fingers.
yeah. So the reason that you do it. Sorry, I don't have any of my gear right now. To show you guys.
No worries. No worries.
Could you imagine that Alan had shown up like fully
If,
dressed?
if this
That'd
was
be
yeah,
awesome.
if this was in Taiwan, I could have taken out all my gear, but it's unfortunately in a different country. But basically, you have to imagine like you're holding the gauge cluster and you're tapping it, like, hey, this is how
Oh,
much.
okay. Like you'd be showing your gauge.
Yeah, but
Oh, gotcha.
that's where it comes from. But like normally, if I'm gonna ask you, I just use my hand and be like, hey, how much do you have? So this is the how much air do you have? And then in Asia, and some other places, you measure the amount of air you have by bar. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with that unit of measurement. Maybe Paul,
I
you are
am.
bar. If you could give us a
Yeah.
breakdown of what a bar is.
Oh no, I cannot
Oh.
scientifically give you a breakdown.
Could you
I
give us
just
like
know
a
the unit.
TLDR?
No, why don't you give us a TLDR, Alan?
Because this is kind of a thing where I just say it so much, and
I don't know the
I
scientific
don't know the
term.
scientific term. All right, so usually in
Or 1 bar is 14 psi.
something like that, actually.
Dude, that was such a call out. I don't know.
I'm starting to think Paul doesn't know what a bar is.
I don't. I mean, I know what it is, and like I know it's a unit of pressure. I don't know the conversion or where
Just
it comes
kidding.
from.
Oh, just kidding.
Okay, Mr. Fahrenheit.
Let me pull up the conversion because in the States you use PSIs. All right. So when we're diving, we used like a cylinder of compressed air, and we measure that with like pounds per square inch. And some places use bar. So the conversion between them is there's about like 2,800 to 3,000 pounds per square inch is equal to 200 bar. So when we're diving, and what I'm used to is your standard aluminum tank will carry around 200 bar of air, and on a recreational dive to about like 18 to 20 meters, you could stretch it for about like an hour is a very healthy time. This is including like getting in the water, diving down, looking around, coming up slowly, doing your safety stop, and like swimming back. Yeah. So we have 200 bar. So if I ask you this, right, you can reply like, oh, maybe I have 100 or like 150 or in pounds per square inch. I think when I was diving in Seattle, we were wearing gloves too, which also affected how you do hand signs. You have to do like 25 and then 100 or something.
Okay. Also, the conversion is 1 to 14.
It is 1 to 14? Okay.
Or 1 to 14 and a half. So I was pretty
You
close.
were spot on.
I take it back, Paul. I'm impressed.
Oh, here's a good one. This means I'm low on air. So if you see your buddy go like this,
Like tapping their chest.
That's tapping your chest with your
with your
fist.
fist. Yeah. So this means I'm low on air, and then this is I'm out of air.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's not a good
That is
signal
not
to
a good one.
encounter.
Yeah. This is I'm out of air. Generally, you
That's like
yeah
the what do you call that? The like
cutthroat.
cutting your throat. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's like the nix it. Yeah.
It's a tough one. But when you learn to dive, you learn to never put yourself in that situation.
I hope so. I hope so.
I don't want it to sound like scary, and I don't want to scare anyone off. It's just a safety thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If you ever encountered I'm out of air,
Mhm.
what do you do as a rescue diver? You've gone through the training.
Yeah.
Is there a fix to that?
Oh, this is not even as a rescue diver. You have to teach this to your open water students. So
Okay.
Can you like share regulators?
yeah, I really wish I had my gear to show you because it makes so much sense.
Oh, you can like share air with if someone's out of air. I see.
I have a
Okay.
picture. Yeah. So this would be the regulator. This is the piece of equipment that you breathe with. And really quickly, just to answer your question about like, oh, what if your buddy is out of air? Well, we can see in the bottom left, there's second stage. There's two hoses. There's a black one and a yellow one. That yellow one is your backup. So all divers, you have to have that backup one for your buddy. You can also never dive alone. You have to be with a buddy. So if your buddy was running out of air, then you could share it with them. And then there's a procedure that you do where you kind of like hold on to their arm, you make sure they're okay, and then you have to like stay like holding on to each other and descend together like safely. So in the entry level course, you learn how to do all of this.
Okay, that's good that they teach you the safety stuff at the beginning.
Yeah. So
That makes
all
sense,
bases
yeah.
are covered, but more hand signs. Maybe we could do some fun ones. Shark is like this.
Shark.
Okay,
So
classic, the little
you're
shark
doing a
fin.
fin on top of your head.
Yeah,
Yeah, shark.
Are we supposed to be afraid of sharks?
It's
Wait, I would panic if I saw that signal.
you feel like you would, but then the more you dive, the more excited you are for it because you're like, oh man, something cool, you know?
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Or another
Okay.
one like hammerhead. I saw this one hammerhead.
So hitting both sides of your head with your fists.
Not like hitting your head, but just because you want to like you can't say anything, so you have to kind of bring attention to yourself a little bit underwater. But pretty much putting your hands like here. I think when I saw hammerhead, I was freaking out. It was crazy because hammerheads usually are only at deeper, like 60 meters around there. But I was diving at 20 meters and plow, and they came up out of the blue, and it was a really cool experience. I'll touch more on that later if I
That is
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Okay. That's an abnormal behavior for hammerheads to come up that shallow?
Not super abnormal, but rare, definitely rare.
We're
Yeah.
lucky that you were right place, right time.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
It was a good story. But another one would be jellyfish or anything that swims in like a kind of like an undulating way. So we have jellyfish, octopus, like cuttlefish, squid. Yeah.
Just to describe that for our audio listeners, if someone's like fist bump and then they go jellyfish and back away to like psych you out, that's the hand signal we just did.
So other than the pressure thing, Alan, are all of these pretty universal across anywhere you'll dive? Is that what's like set up by this PADI organization?
Yeah.
Like, does everyone use the same hand signals?
Everybody uses the same hand signals. If you learn from Patty, everybody uses the same hand signals, same process, same safety practices, same everything. The only thing that's different is just your unit of measurement. So if you're familiar with like the imperial system, use the imperial system. If you like the metric system, use the metric system. I personally am a lot more comfortable on the metric.
Yeah, I'm sure it's just like whatever you learn. It's probably easier
Yeah,
the first
definitely.
time.
But I think talking about getting into the hobby though, gear is definitely something that I think people get like the wrong idea about because getting into scuba diving is kind of intimidating. I feel like it's hard to do it alone too. It's a lot easier with a friend or a buddy, relative, sibling, anything. But learning alone can be tough because you need to find someone to dive with.
Yeah. Is getting the gear something that you can rent? Like, I'm sure you don't carry around your own aluminum, like, compressed air bottle.
Some people
but
do.
What about, like, oh, really? Like, what about, like, wetsuits and, like, the breathing stuff? And
Mhm.
can you, like, normally rent that from a dive shop? Like, if you go anywhere
Yeah.
to either learn or just have, like, a trip?
For sure. Yeah, so that's the misconception I want to talk about. I think people think you need to spend like thousands of dollars to get the whole set of gear and everything before you could even learn. But that's totally not the case. When you learn, and generally, like I always tell all my students, just like you don't need to buy any gear. You just come and learn, and then after that, like see how you feel about the hobby as a whole, and then decide what you would like to invest in it. Secondhand gear is popular. It's not a bad thing. You need to go and see it for yourself. Maybe have like a second opinion if you're not familiar. Dive shops will almost certainly rent you gear for taking the course, especially for travel.
Yeah. If I like, if you're flying somewhere,
Mhm.
would you recommend that people take like the lessons like in their local area, or do people often like travel to one of these like diving locations and then like take a class there? Because I've seen people do it both ways, but I'm just wondering what you'd recommend.
Yeah. So I would recommend diving in your local shop just to get to know people who live around you and make connections that way. But if you live in a place that's not near a body of water, and for example you have a vacation or holiday going to somewhere that has scuba diving, those places oftentimes they have the course like in a package deal. You learn it in like 3 or 4 days at their like resort at the dive shop, and they cover like everything. They give you all the gear. And you could definitely learn that way. But I would suggest if you live near a body of water that is diveable, to seek out your local shop first. But if by all means, if your only way to dive is to go on a holiday and learn somewhere else, like that's totally doable. There's plenty of rentals everywhere. Um, Sorry, one thing I didn't mention before was that if you were interested in diving, there's two things that I think are pretty useful. The first one is like if you're not comfortable in the water, to start getting yourself comfortable in the water, like swimming in a pool.
So if I get Oh,
Yeah.
okay, you're talking about swimming. I was gonna say if I get seasickness,
Oh
is
yeah.
there anything that can help with that? Because when you're talking about that like water or what do you like washing machine
Yeah,
current,
yeah.
I was telling Hans earlier, I literally threw up the last time I was in something like that.
My dad gets really seasick. Definitely Dramamine or any motion
It does help
sickness.
enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no like cure all remedy for it though. I think you just need to take a
Yeah.
motion sickness pill. Unfortunately.
Eh, it is what it is.
Yeah. I say get yourself comfortable in the water. Snorkel. Snorkel is a really good way because you're just on the surface, very low pressure, kind of. No pun intended, but it's like a low pressure environment.
Yeah.
There is like a skin diver course that's like they teach you how to snorkel. I would really just encourage you to be mindful of the open water. If you're in open water, practice in a pool or a confined space. Really dive within your limits, swim within your limits. Another thing to learn or try diving is called discovery dive, and I think it's priced around like $100 to $200 depending on where you are, and it's about a half-day commitment, I'd say, including like travel and setup. But according to like Patty's website, it total time commitment is around 3 hours, and the minimum age is 10. And what this is basically is it's not a full blown open water course, but you get to learn briefly about some of the concepts of diving, go over the gear, and then an instructor takes you down on a very like shallow, safe dive in like a pool or a calm water environment, and then they kind of give you like this 1 day like trial feeling for like, hey, do you like this like breathing underwater kind of? And then I know a friend uh, from high school who did it, and then he really liked it, and then he came to me, and then we learned together, or not learned together, but he came and learned, and I was the assistant to his course.
That's awesome.
But definitely, those are the things that I would check out if you're interested. Discovery Dive is a really good way to see if you like it.
Cool.
Awesome.
But yeah.
Sweet. Well, Alan, I'm curious if you want to walk us through some of the cool like animals that you've seen, or like some of the cool like specific dives. I know you had some photos prepared. If you want to like go through those.
We're curious. Yeah. Most interesting marine encounters.
Craziest one was when I was really young. I think when I first started diving around 12, I was in the northeastern corner of Taiwan, the northeast coast, and there's if you're very lucky, you can see a blue ring octopus. You guys have heard of it, right?
No.
Oh, you don't know the blue ring octopus?
Oh, I've seen there's a picture floating around on the internet of someone who's touching it bare hand.
Yeah, that's a joke because if you touch it bare hand, like it's gonna bite you, and then bye bye.
It's like super toxic,
Very,
right?
very, very much
What?
so.
Or
Do I need to look up a photo?
Yes, you do. It's really cute, but the bright blue rings mean that like, hey, I'm dangerous. Stay away from me. So
Oh, this looks kind of scary. It looks like it has ringworm.
That's one way to put it.
blue ringworm.
Blue ringworm.
But I don't even want to talk about it anymore, Paul.
No, I'm sorry. I'm
No,
sorry.
just kidding. But these guys are crazy dangerous. Blue ring. So normally, if the little octopus is just chilling out, nobody's messing with him, they don't have any color, right? It's just like a brown octopus, and it's really small. It's only about like this big. I'd say, for anybody that cannot see the camera, just close your fist. It's about that size of your fist or smaller with the tentacles included.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a pretty small one, but only when they feel threatened that they light up blue. And then I got like really close to one when I was really young, and I had no idea because it was near like an exit to a dive site. So everyone was just kind of like going up towards the ladder, and then my instructor saw it. I was like, "Oh my god, that's that's a blue ring octopus." And then I looked over, and then it was just really, really like right next to me. And I feel like if anything had gone wrong and I like provoked it, then maybe like it could have like bit me or something. But I just was really freaked out after hearing about all the venom stories and stuff like that, or like toxic stories about it.
That's crazy. Okay.
Yeah, but they're generally harmless unless you provoke them.
Gotcha.
And also, I don't want that to freak anyone out because when you learn to dive, you always learn like just don't touch anything.
Yeah. For the safety of you and the animal, I imagine.
Pretty much.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and then that makes like your buoyancy control really important underwater. So I've seen the blue ring octopus. I have seen some like World War II wrecks in Palau. I saw something called Jake's seaplane. I think it was an American airplane, and it had crashed into the ocean. Unfortunately, I don't know the exact model. I just know the name of the site. The other one was a Japanese fishing boat, and then during the war, I believe some of the fishing boats were turned like into like a naval vessel or something for like cargo transport or something like that. But anyways, they had this old fishing boat that was converted into like military use or sorry, naval use, and then it was sunk in the water like near one of the hotels that is currently there in Palau actually. So it's a really cool dive site, and you could see like these old helmets or guns that were like grown over with like sea sponges. So it's really interesting. You could barely tell like what it is. I really enjoyed like looking at the wrecks because they're really ominous and it's kind of freaky.
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, historical too. That's really interesting. Yeah.
Another like thing that's really fun to look at is definitely like geography. So in Palau, there's this place called the Blue Corner, and the Blue Corner is this huge drop off. So the top of the Blue Corner isn't very deep. It's maybe like 10 to 20-ish meters or so. It's very shallow. But then it drops off this like sheer cliff, and then it's dark blue water, which is hundreds of meters, and you cannot see the bottom. And there's a certain point where light doesn't like light doesn't go further, and that's pretty freaky too. So you're kind of just floating over it and looking down like at like an abyss. And that is a really great dive site. The current coming up from that shelf is
Wow.
really strong, and you could do this thing called hook diving. So you have like a kind of like a metal hook on a rope, and you attach that to yourself, and then you hook onto the rocks, and the current kind of pushes you back, and you float kind of like a kite. And then because
Oh, that's so
yeah,
cool.
because the current is so strong and it's like constantly like churning in front of you, there's a lot of fish and sharks, like not big sharks, but like reef sharks that come and look and try to like eat stuff and feed around that area. So it's kind of like this huge show that's going on in front of you, and then you kind of get to like fly back and look at it. It's really cool. That's also a place that I saw hammerhead sharks, and normally they don't really come out. Yeah, normally they don't come out of the deep, but they in this for some reason that morning I was there. It was really early, and we saw a male and a female just like come out like briefly swim pretty deep under us, but they came and then they swam away, and it was you can tell it's a male and a female because one was larger than the other, and then typically I think hammerheads have sexual dimorphism. I think that's what you call it. So the male or the female is larger than the male, or they look different. Let me check.
You saw a cute couple out for a morning stroll.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that was a really great one. Oh, I showed you guys some pictures about that nuclear power plant outlet, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I think that's another one that is really cool to dive at. In the northeast coast of Taiwan, there is a power plant.
Do you want us to share screen those photos?
Yes, I do. All right, here we go. These are some of my diving friends. On the left, there's two of my mentors. I've known them for a long time, and on the right is another one of our instructors. And we're all going out with this side mount equipment, and we're going to dive at the nuclear water outlet number 4, and that is a decommissioned water outlet for a nuclear power plant, and it looks like a spaceship. So here you can see our group kind of hovering over it. The gear we're using is side mount because instead of being mounted on the back, the tanks are mounted on the side, and that gives you better maneuverability in a tight space. And we actually got to dive inside of it. So this is what it looks like when you're inside looking out.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I think the main attraction is the light. The photo doesn't do it justice, but when you're there, the light is really nice.
So inside, you go inside this like tube, basically.
hmm
Are there a lot of like fish and coral that have like grown up to be inside of
Yeah,
there?
so the inside is pretty much covered in like sponge and algae and stuff like that. You can kind of see in this picture right here, like on the edges of that hole, you could see all the like rough kind of like organisms growing on the side of it, because it's not like a smooth surface. And then so in the middle, there's a duct that goes down, and if the power plant was in use, the water would flow in through here and go in to cool the power plant. Because it's decommissioned, it's not. So this picture is me at the bottom, and there's nothing. There's absolutely no light, but you can kind of see like near my fin, there's some orange like clumps in the ground.
Mhm.
Those are like spon. Those oh sorry, those are sponges that fell off of like the top and the sides, and they can fall down to the bottom. And there's even some like crabs that live at the bottom, and they eat off of stuff that like falls down there.
Yeah, it's crazy how much stuff is able to grow in like you'd think like
Yeah,
uninhabitable
yeah.
environments. Alan, the other thing I wanted to ask about was your gear. You talked about the regulators earlier, and you talked about the different ways you can wear the air containers on your back. Do you want to give us a little bit of the story of the different kinds of gear and what the different types of gear are used for when you're diving?
TLDR, diving gear. Done easy, done short. This is like really simple. Okay, you need mask, fins, boots, a wetsuit or a dry suit, a regulator, a BCD, a weight belt or a weight system, and a dive computer, and a tank. So, in all this gear, the stuff that I need to explain, number one is the regulator. Regulator lets you breathe compressed gas out of a tank. There's a first stage where the compressed gas hits that. It goes down to a second stage where the pressure is lowered so that you can inhale it. And then the amount of air is dependent on like a piston system in the regulator. It's very complex. There's different kinds of regulators. I'm not going to go into it. But anyways, long story short, helps you breathe compressed air. Really interesting. It has a gauge on it, and it also has a low pressure hose that attaches the tank to your BCD. So your BCD is going to be your jacket kind of system, and that will hook your tank on your back and also kind of keep everything around you kind of like tight and organized. And also, most importantly, it's called a BCD because it's a buoyancy control device. So the low pressure hose from the regulator actually connects to your BCD, and you have a inflator and a deflator switch, and that lets you inflate and deflate and control your buoyancy underwater. Because when you learn how to dive, you're given the example of a balloon underwater, right? So when you bring a balloon underwater, the air inside of it gets crushed or compressed, and then when you move shallower, it expands. So you have to think of every pocket of air in your body like that. So that in turn lets you control your buoyancy because you can let air in and out of your BCD. Another thing that you have to keep in mind when you dive is that you need to be wary of the pressure and like equalize your ears. So because your sinuses are a like pocket of air in your body, you need to equalize that to the pressure around you, and you do so by like lightly pinching your nose or covering your nostrils and then gently like exhaling. So when you wear a scuba mask, your nose is already covered, so you can just lightly pinch it. But if you've ever taken an airplane before, and you're ascending or descending when your ears pop, that's the kind of feeling it is.
It took me a long time to learn how to do that as a
Yeah.
kid. I used to just scream. Like I was probably like the worst kid on the airplane before I learned how to
Yeah.
do that or like chew gum or whatever the tricks are.
And another thing is that when I first learned how to dive, we didn't have dive computers. So what that is like a watch or a little thing on your gauge cluster that has like an analog screen, or now they're even at a point where they're kind of really like pretty high resolution screens. But anyways, it will tell you. a lot of things. It'll calculate the maximum time you can spend at a given depth, how long it takes to decompress after the dive, your ascent rate, your descent rate. Um, a lot of fancier models can even go as far as to like tell you how much nitrogen is in your body and at what rate it's dissipating.
Wow.
So
Okay.
technology has come very far. So pretty much everybody gets a dive computer nowadays. It is a very useful piece of equipment. It's about $150 for the cheapest one. And then beforehand, we had to use decompression tables, and that was really annoying to calculate. I still teach my students how to do it just because I feel like it's useful.
This is for the bends, right? This
Yeah,
is the
yeah. So,
decompression
so talking
tables.
about decompression and safety, always dive within your limits. You want to dive within the limits of the least experienced person in your group. If you're uncomfortable, call it. Always communicate. Never dive without a buddy. Prepare well. Take it seriously, and then listen to your body because you lose heat 25 times faster underwater compared to in air. So your body will tell you like I'm too cold, and listen to it the first time it tells you that. So about the example of the balloon kind of like getting smaller under pressure or expanding with less pressure. So something that happens to our bodies when we breathe air underwater is that our body absorbs inert gases like nitrogen. So when we breathe air on the surface, it's at 21% oxygen, 79% nitrogen, roughly. And there's like a less than 1% of gas mixed in, but we don't like count it here. When your joint or when your tissues become too saturated with nitrogen, that leads to decompression sickness, and that can harm your body. And when you have decompression sickness, you get like joint pain, numbness, tingling, muscular weakness, stuff like that. And I think even more extreme cases can like permanently like harm your body. So it's really important to like pay attention to the amount of time that you spend at each depth because like I said, like our bodies aren't meant to be underwater. We're not meant to be like underwater under this much pressure, breathing air at that. So the next thing I want to talk about related to that is nitrogen narcosis. You can actually get a feeling that is basically like being drunk from the effect of nitrogen on your central nervous system because at a high pressure, nitrogen can act as an anesthetic and it affects the central nervous system, makes you have a euphoric feeling, impaired judgment, drowsiness, confusion, loss of coordination, hallucinations in like really, really severe cases. But diving for too deep, too long is generally considered like pretty dangerous. Like you don't want to do that.
Holy cow. Okay. So safety
Safety
first.
first for sure. They'll
Yeah,
teach you about it.
that's a good
Really
message.
interesting though. Yeah.
On this topic though, really quickly, there's something called nitrox, and nitrox means any blend of gas that you breathe that's higher than 21% oxygen. So when we use this kind of gas, it reduces the amount of nitrogen absorption and lets us have a greater bottom time, so we could stay underwater longer. You might ask why not use 100% oxygen, right? So then we don't have to use the nitrogen. Like you don't have that problem. But the problem with that is oxygen toxicity. So when the partial pressure of oxygen is too high, it can harm your body and directly damage cells in your body. And when we say partial pressure in scuba diving, it just means that like it's the pressure exerted by a single component of the gas. So in this case, the single component oxygen, the amount of pressure it's exerting. So it's essentially representing the contribution of that specific gas to the total pressure at a given depth. So if the partial pressure of oxygen exceeds 1.4 bar, then that's not good for you. So basically, what that means is if you take 100% oxygen, you cannot breathe it underwater, or else it'll affect your body negatively. And then also, if you're using nitrox, they have a certain maximum operating depths where you can't exceed it, or else the rate at which oxygen, I think, and like enters your body and like affects your cells is too dangerous.
That's science shit right there.
That is
See,
science.
Sorry, that's the
I love
little
that. I
like
love that.
segment for anybody
No,
that's interested. This is
yeah,
this is the science.
that's so interesting. Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Alan. Just obviously, this podcast itself is about jumping into a new hobby or new passion every week. So, what's kind of the elevator for pitch for picking up scuba diving?
Okay, the elevator pitch. If I only had 30 seconds to tell someone about diving, I would tell them, or I would ask them first, have you ever been to an aquarium and felt like you just wanted to get closer? Or have you been on a boat or near a body of water where you can just barely see something below the surface, but you want to get so much closer to it and see it up close? Then I really, really cannot recommend scuba diving enough. And there's a lot of things that build up to scuba diving, such as like snorkeling and free diving and other activities. So I really encourage people to go to their local dive shops and just see what's up and just ask, hey, what kind of diving do you have? What kind of snorkeling do you have? What kind of activities are there? And it's a really open and welcoming community. And I'm sure that wherever you go, they will welcome you with open arms.
That's awesome.
That's beautiful and wholesome. I'm sold.
I love the Seattle Aquarium, and what you said just like made me picture the room where, they might have this at other aquariums, where you're like in a dome and all the fish are like all around you 360.
Yes.
And that's like my way of doing it without ever scuba diving. So I that's exactly like how I'm picturing your statement.
No,
I love
because
it.
I've really been diving in the middle of a school of fish before, and it wasn't anything crazy either. It was just me and my buddy. I don't know if you remember Aaron, but he was the one that I was talking about who was interested, and then I was the assistant to his class. I took him diving on his official dive, and then we got surrounded by like a school of fish, and then they would like dart up right in front of your body, and then because they're silver, it's kind of like these flashing lights. Really cool.
What a cool
So
first
cool.
dive.
Yeah. Alan, do you have any plugs, either personal YouTube channels, any pieces of media you want to give a shout out to?
Personally, I'm not on social media much. I really just love diving, just to love it.
Love that. I love that.
I will say though, I would recommend the Patty website if you're interested in any courses, because it's very concise and it's very beginner friendly. The information is very easily digestible on there. So check out the Patty website. A YouTube channel that is really entertaining would be Jonathan Bird's Blue World. It is very lighthearted. He's a pretty funny, chill guy, and he goes over a lot of different things. It's really interesting. And then for a documentary that's really good, I say Chasing Coral. It is a little emotional, so I will put that warning out there. It is a little emotional, it's a little sad, but Chasing Coral is very, very good documentary. And then if you're ever in Taiwan and you are seeking an English-speaking dive shop, I can't recommend Taiwan Dive Buddy enough. That's where I learned to dive. That's where my mentors are, and that's where my diving community is. So that's my plug.
That is perfect. Alan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hopefully, you see a blue ring octopus from your preferred amount of space, whether that is up close or far away to whatever diver you are. Alan, thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the This Week I'm Into podcast, and a huge thank you to Alan Liu for sharing his passion on scuba diving. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future topics, please reach out at thisweekiminto@gmail.com and give us a follow on Instagram at thisweekiminto. Please rate us 5 stars and share this episode with a friend. We're doing our best to grow the podcast, and your help really goes a long way. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
I think that was the best drop spot we found in a while, Hans. I found some super cool stuff just off the end of the reef.
I totally agree. I saw this yellow seahorse swimming around, which was odd since they normally sit in one location. Also saw this cool pink octopus. Well, it was cool until it inked me. I couldn't see much anymore through my goggles, which is why I had to come back up.
That's no problem, Hans. I caught the best thing yet.
Caught? What do you mean?
Yeah, check out this little clownfish. Dude was swimming all around way off the reef. Probably could have died if it wasn't for me. Check this out. He's even got a busted little fin. It's so teeny tiny. No way he survives in the wild, right?
I guess I didn't see any other clownfish around. Maybe he was all alone?
At least I can feel good knowing I'm not separating a child from his family.
You really shouldn't take any more fish out of the water, though. We know it's very damaging to the environment and can hurt both you and the aquatic life.
You're right, Hans. Won't happen again.
So what are you going to do with that little fella?
Well, my brother's got this orthodontics practice, right? And he bought this place from a Chinese restaurant a little while back, but he kept the fish tank, and his daughter's always talking about how much she loves the fish. I think this little clownfish would fit right in. He's basically in a rehabilitation center.
Whoa, sounds super great. All right, well, let's head there then. What's the address so I can drop you off?
42 Wallaby Way, Sydney, Australia.
No duh, Paul. Where do you think we're docked at? Not like I was going to take you to the aquarium out in Monterey Bay. Maybe if you'd found a bluefish. All right, we're off.
Hey, Hans, did you hear something yelling at us from the water?
It's probably nothing. You're getting seasick again. Let's get you and this little one home.